Azure Service Bus, another very important service in Azure. Here we are actually supposed to have two applications communicate with each other. Originally, these two applications used to communicate with each other. Distributed computing implementation, I would say, is implemented through WCF in most of the scenarios. Azure is going to provide cloud service environment for hosting a WCF service, but there are certain limitations of it. So we are going to first begin with hosting a WCF service in Azure, understanding its limitation, and then moving on to using service bus namespace, under which we are going to have relayed messaging, queues, topics and subscriptions. And eventually we are going to deal with transactions in queues. So first let us see how we can have a WCF service hosted in a Windows Azure environment. So as usual, I'll create a new project, select here cloud service application, WCF WebRole demo app, and I'll put all them service bus folder. It's going to provide us a window now through which I have to select here WCF service web role. We have earlier seen ASP.NET web role, worker role. Now we are using WCF service web role, and we'll change this name. We'll call it as Hello WCF service web role. As usual, we will have two projects: the service project, WCF service web role project, and the cloud service project. Cloud service project is registering a role, having configuration file and the definition files. WCF service is always supposed to have certain contract, which is actually a interface. iService1. I'll change this to, let us say, iMath service. So I want an interface called as iMath service. And this math service is supposed to provide implementation of certain methods. Say I would like to have add, which is going to add two integers n1, n2, and return them. At the same time, I would also have one more implementation of add, which is for, let us say, adding complex numbers. But for complex number, I would like to create a class. So I will have a public class complex, and complex class will be having two parts, real part and imaginary part. So let us call it as public integer real, get and set, public integer imaginary, get and set. A very simple thing. Now here you see interface is declared as service contract and methods are supposed to be declared as operation contract. In short, they are operations actually. So only those methods of the interface which are mentioned as operations can be invoked from the client. So I will have two complex numbers. And when I add these two complex numbers, I'm going to get a third complex number, which I'm going to return here. So I have a iMath service, which is a service contract, having two operation contracts, add and add complex. Now, whenever we have a custom user defined data type here, we are supposed to write data contract, and the members of this data contract, which we want to serialize between client and server, should be declared as data member. These are the requirements. This is WCF specification. So I'm actually doing nothing special in context of cloud. I've just declared an interface, which is a service contract, and methods, which are operation contract, And if a method has either parameter or return type which is a custom user defined class or a predefined class, it must be serializable. The extended version of serializable with little additional features is what is a data contract. And the members of the data contract which have to be serialized between client and server, data has to be transported between client and server, must be declared as data member. All these are the specifications. So what is already there, this was already there, I'm deleting it, we don't need this. Now for this service contract, I should provide a implementation. That means I have to provide a class called as iMath service. By default, only one file will be created here, service1.svc. Maybe I can change the name of this file. I'll call it as math service.svc. Additionally, I go to service.cs file, and in CS file we will have a class name that also from service1 I'm changing to math service, and it implements iMath service. So whatever are the default implementations studio generated, I'm deleting them and I'll provide a custom implementation here. So we give here right click iMath service, right click quick actions implement and provide implementation. So return n1 plus n2, whereas here we create a new complex number where the real part of this is equal to c1.real plus c2.real, c dot imaginary is equal to c1 dot imaginary, c2 dot imaginary, and I'll return c. So I have my service which is implementing my service contract. Now this is a very simple example I have taken, but actually while doing something more realistic, you might have employee service, and employee service probably would implement the methods, and employee class can be your data contract, which is going to be added to a database, add employee, edit employee, delete employee, get employee. All these can be the methods in the service contract, and their implementations can be there in the service. Now after having all this, just on I wanted to have SVC edited. So here also I service one is the file name which I want to change it to I math service. I would also like to rename this file, that is I service 1 to I math service 1. Now let us right click on this math service.svc. You see when you select math service.svc, actually it is opening math service.svc.cs. So what I want to do is right click on math service.svc, open with some text editor, source code text editor, and you'll see here there is a service host directive. The service host directive has reference to the service. In our case, the service is hello sir, math service now. And the code behind file is mathservice.svc.cs. Because we have manually changed the name all these problems. But otherwise, you can always right click here, add a new item, and here simply select a WCF service. WCF service and give here the name math service. Automatically everything will be properly taken care of. You have to only edit the interface and the implementation in the class. So let us say my service is ready. Also let us look at the web.config. We have got service model here which has a service behavior, service metadata, service debug. So we do not see here anything like service endpoint. We don't have an endpoint. Actually, we are supposed to have under service model a endpoint, and that endpoint is identification of address, binding, and contract of the service. But when nothing is provided and SVC is there, the service is going to be hosted under IIS web, and in those kind of cases, basic HTTP binding is supported. So by default only we have got basic HTTP binding support there, even though we do not write. And that I'm going to show you that there is something like WCF basic HTTP binding in client application when I'm going to build a client for this. So yes, if you are a WCF expert, you already know all these things what I have done here. It's just that the WCF service is now going to be hosted in IIS with the help of a cloud service. That is the only difference and nothing else. So as usual, we can right click on the cloud service, make it as the startup project and press Ctrl F5 to execute. Emulators are opening, storage emulator and UI emulator, and then obviously the browser will open, giving us the content of the root folder. Here actually we should visit mathservice.svc. That's what we have to visit, mathservice.svc. So this is the URL of mathservice.svc. Client application is supposed to generate a proxy for this math service. To generate a proxy, we will need a WSDL document, and that can be generated with the help of a tool called as svcutil.exe. Obviously for us, because we are using Studio, we don't have to manually use svcutil.exe, but I'll copy this URL. And in the same solution, I'm adding one more project now. Ideally speaking, we should add in another Studio instance. So let us do that. Why unnecessary complicated? I'm just taking another Studio instance in which I would like to build a client application which is going to invoke that service. So I'll take a new project. Simple console based application is good enough for building a client. I'll call it as WCF or Hello WCF Service Client. And to make use of that service, we need a proxy. So to generate a proxy, I go to references, right click here, add service reference, and here we should give the URL. I paste it here. What I copied earlier from browser, I paste it here. Click on go. I have the service. Just give some namespace, something based on the context. I'll give it as my demo services. Something, anything is okay. Click on OK. So we will have now a proxy class generated. Studio is actually in background using svcutil.exe and generated a proxy class for us, which is viewable from here. Click on show all files, expand, service map, and here you see this is the proxy class. Data contract, serializable here. Server we had data contract, here it is serializable. iMath service, service contract, and of course we'll have math service client, to which we can make use of this service. So what I'll do now is here, let us say math service client, which is under the namespace my demo services. So using on top, you see the first line, using statement is added. This is supposed to be a proxy instance, so I'll call it as proxy. This proxy will be responsible for forwarding the request to the actual service. So I create the proxy instance and I say proxy.add maybe 10,20. That's it. Likewise, if you want, you can have two complex numbers. Where real part is something, imaginary part is something. Likewise, we'll have one more. We have real part, imaginary part, and I can say proxy dot add complex and give your C1 comma C2. Mind you, these additions and subtract this addition of complex or integers is not going to be performed locally on the client machine. It is going to be performed on the remote, the server machine where the service is running. Right now for demo, both client and service are running on the same machine, but in real time, clients will be many, service will be one. So how it is overall going to work is the service is hosted under cloud service in Azure, and we will have various clients using that service. Now these clients can be console based applications, these clients can be Windows based applications, these clients can be a mobile application, any kind of application where we can generate the proxy and invoke the method like it is here, we can have a client application. Rather, one service can be a client to another service. Now press Ctrl F5 and execute this. So where is the service method executed? On server. Just to add a proof that these services are executing on server, what I'll do is here I'll add trace, basically diagnostic trace dot write two numbers are added, and here I'll say trace dot write line two complex numbers are added. Now again run it, press Ctrl F5, active service will be stopped and the new instance will be deployed. All done. Close this. On the client, we can have the emulator opened actually, UI emulator. Hello WCF service instance is running here, and I run the client to see that. Oh, we did not get them here. Maybe I was not running in debug mode, and what is there? Math service trace dot, okay, trace information. Rebuild it. We should get that message. Just a confirmation that these methods are executing. Run the client once again. And in the emulator, let us run it in the debug mode. We can view the output in the output window. Output window. In this up from the client. Two numbers are added. Trace information. Not sure why it is not writing in the editor. Not. Anyways, what is important is we are getting the output in the output window of the server, and that is fine with us. Just wanted to show you that the client is submitting a request and the service is executing the request, and the output is rendered on the client in the form of return value. So this is how we have the service developed. All the steps are given to you in the handout also. You can just go through it, build a client, and it's a simple client actually. Now, what is the basic problem with this in Azure? That is what I'm going to show you in the next chapter, and then proceed with the next main topic of ours, that is service bus. But for now, in this example, we have cleanly understood how a WCF service web role can be created in a cloud service. That's all in this. Thank you.